the MSc Language Sciences program. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we've got, so I've got a little bit of just sort of a presentation to give, but then also we're going to go over some of your questions that you've asked. And hopefully at the end, we'll have time for more questions if you want to either unmute yourself or pop those in the chat. But let's go ahead and get started first with this bit of a presentation, just sort of an overview of the program. So it's the MSc Language Sciences program that's sort of housed within the Department of Speech, Hearing, and Phonetic Sciences, that we also refer to in short form as SHAPS. So I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an overview broadly of how different, so I've used the term department, but we also have different levels of organization within University College London, just so you can sort of situate yourself within the local department and then this degree program. So the structure at UCL, we have at the highest level what are called faculties, and then each faculty has multiple divisions, and then each division has multiple departments. So we are part of the Faculty of Brain Sciences, and then within that faculty, we are part of PALS, Psychology and Language Sciences, and then PALS has a number of departments, of which we have SHAPS. So there are 11 faculties at UCL, they're all listed here. And as I mentioned, we are part of Brain Sciences, and that faculty then has 9 different divisions. We are PALS, Psychology and Language Sciences here. And then locally within that, we have a number of different departments. And a lot of them are, if you come to study here, you'll be part of the Speech, Hearing, and Phonetic Sciences department, which is in a building called Chandler House. And actually, a lot of these departments within the PALS division are located in Chandler House as well. And we'll talk about some of the facilities that would be available to you for research at Chandler House. So again, I mentioned this as part of the Department of Speech, Hearing, and Phonetic Sciences. We are 10 academic staff members who I've listed here, and 2 of us, along with Rebecca, form the sort of the teaching and research team for this program. And I mentioned that we are in Chandler House, and Chandler House is where a lot, not all, but a lot of your classes are taught. But then also importantly, it's where the main sort of different equipment we have for our research facilities are located in the basement of Chandler House. And we have this, you can sort of see a picture here. To the right, this is the door that enters into this large, sort of long corridor of laboratories. And then within that, we have these different booths that have specialized equipment for whatever aspect of speech production or processing you might be interested. So we have, for example, people who work with a technology called EEG, which is essentially a cap that goes on top of the head and then monitors blood flow through different parts of the scalp. And you can use that to then or sort of interpret what parts of the brain are active during, for example, reading or listening to speech or producing speech. A similar type of methodology called FNIRS, which also sort of works on this understanding of we can get some sort of information from the brain without actually getting down into the brain. In this case, getting near infrared information of heat that's coming off the scalp. We can sort of do the other way as well. So instead of understanding what the brain is doing, we also have technology that sort of inhibits or interrupts what the brain is doing by applying magnetic stimulation to the brain. The head of our department, Patty Dank, she uses this in a lot of her research. We also have equipment for tracking where the eyes are looking on a screen. This is really useful, for example, if you're interested in understanding how people process speech, and then you play certain sounds to them, and then have them look at different words on the screen. This is a really good proxy for understanding when people start to process things, because our eye movements tend to be very, very quick with respect to other sort of movements that our body might make. We're also interested, like for myself, I work in speech production, in particular speech articulation. So we use, for example, ultrasound to look at the shape of the tongue as people speak. We also use what's called electromagnetic articulometry, or EMA, to track these little electromagnetic sort of coils that you can glue on people's tongues or lips or around their head to understand where those parts of the speech articulators are moving at any given point in time. We even have recently I was involved in a grant project where we used video imaging to track the shape of the tongue or the shape of the lips in different languages to understand how different languages implement rounding of the lips for different sounds. And of course, a lot of our work can involve speech acoustics as well. So we even have this image here is not at Chandler House, but it's not too far away. We have a dedicated recording booth that is an anechoic chamber, so there's no possibility of any sort of echoing happening in there. You can get the highest quality audio that you can possibly record in that booth. So it's just sort of an overview of some of the tools that might be at your disposal as a research student at UCL. But let's talk about the program itself. So again, I mentioned we're 3 people on the program team. Myself, I'm the director of the program, Yosef, who is the deputy director, and Rebecca, who is our teaching administrator. So as a student in the program, then the 3 of us would help you sort of traverse the program and make decisions on what sort of modules you might take and so forth. But the program itself, it's useful to talk about. You probably are here interested in a particular, what we call a route. You might be interested in multiple routes, but what is this sort of route thing anyway? So we have just this one program, which we sort of sometimes refer to as an umbrella program, because in that program, there are then 5 different routes or specializations that you can take, but no matter which route you take, in the end, you get the MSc Language Sciences degree. So that's the one program, and then within that, the specializations are the development of language and speech, sign language and deaf studies, principles of language and speech, neuroscience of language and speech, and technology of language and speech. So there is some commonality over these 5 routes, but then we'll talk about also what the differences are. So the similarities between them, we have 3 different types of modules that you would take. We have compulsory modules, which everyone on all routes take. We have optional modules, which are route-specific, sort of specialized options that we've curated to be part of that specialization. And then we have elective routes, which can be any modules from within the entire PALS division. Those can also be optional modules from other routes. So as we go through, I'll talk about what the optional modules are on each route. If you are interested in a different route, but you see a particular module on one of the routes that I talk about, that's not the one you're interested in, but you're interested in that module, you could take that as one of your elective options. So the 3 compulsory modules that all students on all routes take are topics and methods in language sciences. This is a module where every week there is a new member of staff that then gives a sort of brief overview lecture of the methods that they use in their sort of specialized area. So for example, the week that I teach about articulatory methods, how to use different tools to get at sort of inside the vocal tract to see what people are doing with the different speech articulators. So this is a broad overview over, you can sort of consider this the entire field of speech and language sciences. taught by specialists within the department in each of these different areas. This is a quantitative program, so an understanding of statistics is very important for us. So one of the compulsory modules is a fundamental statistics module. Now, if you have a background in statistics, there's also the option to opt in, and there's a test that we have to determine whether it's good for you to opt in to a higher level. But we also have an intermediate and then an advanced statistics module available. So if you don't have any statistics background, the majority of you will be taking this fundamental statistics module that we have here. If you do have a background, don't worry, you're not going to be sort of bored by sitting in this module learning things that you already know. So you can have the option of taking higher level stats modules. And then something that's listed here as a module, and you can see the number of credits it's worth is far more than these other ones. That's because that particular module code is linked to the research project itself. So there are 180 credits total for the degree program. You can see a third of that is dedicated to the research project. And we'll talk about that later, one of the most important parts of that 1-year degree program. Okay, so we'll go through briefly the 5 different routes and then look at these optional modules. So first, the development of language and speech. So the 5 modules listed here: neuroscience of language, developmental disorders of language learning and cognition, advanced topics in language and speech development, semantic and pragmatic development, introduction to child's language development. You can see how these all have a theme of language development. There are 5 here. If you are a student on the development of language and speech route, you then choose 3 of these modules as your 3 optional choices. Then there are 2. Is this a typo, Rebecca? I thought there were. Is this 3 elective modules? I have 2 here.
Yeah, it's 3.
I think it's 3. Okay, so there's a typo here. So 3 compulsory modules, 3 optional modules, and then 3 elective modules. So again, the elective modules, we sort of have what we really sort of pride ourselves on in this program is that we have sort of taken the time to tailor these specialty specific options, but then also at the same time give you the flexibility of taking either more modules within this list or other modules in other areas that you might be interested in. So your elective modules can be, they can include the other 2 on this optional list, or any modules within the entire psychology and language sciences division. So it doesn't even have to be something that is housed necessarily within Chandler House. Neuroscience of language and speech, the list of 5 optional modules to choose from: introduction to the brain and imaging the brain, neuroscience of language, brain stimulation, that's the TMS that I was talking about, that sort of inhibits brain activity by providing magnetic stimulation. Introduction to EEG was the first technology that I showed you, that CAP, that sort of monitors brain activity. EEG for speech and language research, and auditory cognitive neuroscience. Again, typo, elective, there are 3 then, elective modules that you choose, not 2. Principles of language and speech, the optional module list is here: rehabilitation of acquired neurogenetic communication difficulties, it's a very long title, conversation analysis, introduction to speech science, this is one of the modules that I teach, I'm currently teaching that this term, second language speech learning, and sociolinguistics. Technology of language and speech, the other module I teach is the first one listed here: programming in R, applications for speech data processing. Introduction to deep learning for speech and language processing, this is taught by Yosef. Also taught by Yosef is the next one here: advanced speech data processing in R. A new module that is taught this year for the first time: signals and systems for speech and hearing, and computational linguistics. You might be interested in what is these sort of module codes. Some of them say PALS and some of them say PLIN. The PLIN modules are taught out of the linguistics department. That's still part of the PALS division, and you don't have to worry about the module code. These are all part of our sort of like team that we have between the different departments. And finally, sign language and deaf studies. Optional modules are listed as deafness, cognition and language, deaf cultures and identities, sociolinguistics, linguistics of sign language, and developmental disorders of language learning and cognition. So again, for a given route, you then choose 3 from the list of 5 curated specialized modules, but then an additional 3 electives from anywhere within the whole division. So what would your year look like as an MSc Language Sciences student? You'll see often here, we also just put this as a short form, MC Lang Sci, so the Lang Sci program. So it's a 1-year program that consists of 3 terms. Terms 1 and 2 are when you receive your taught content. So this is when you take your classes. End of September, usually to the end of December, is when term 1 takes place. Term 2 then after the winter break to the end of March. Term 3 then, usually about the end of April to beginning of June. This fulfills 2 purposes. Sometimes the assessment for a given module that you might take in term 1 or 2 might have the examination for the module in term 3. So sometimes it's within the term, sometimes it's in term 3. But importantly, most of term 3 is when you're going to be working on your research project. So I mentioned this before, it's one of the most important parts of the program, and indeed it's a third of your total credits. So the research project is where you get to work with a supervisor within UCL. Most of the supervisors are within SHAPS, but we also have supervisors in other places within the division. Some of them are even outside of the division. But at the beginning of the year, you will have access to a list of different projects you can apply for. So during that time, you sort of shop around and you look at all the different projects that supervisors have put on as ideas, and then you spend that time to meet with different supervisors. So you want to know, is this the right project for me to work on? But also, is this person the right supervisor for me to have? So it's a time for you to sort of meet with multiple supervisors, talk about ideas, and see if what they've proposed is something you're interested in. This is also a time if you see something listed that sort of, piques your interest, but isn't quite what you want to do. That's your time to also discuss with the potential supervisors some sort of modification. So maybe it's related to your interests, but you want to do something a little bit different. Then you can discuss with the potential supervisors, here's my idea for a project. Is this something that you would be willing to supervise? And then at the end of this period, you then sort of lock in your decision and you choose a project to work on. Most students don't begin working on the project until term 3. They're really busy with the modules and the classes they're taking in terms 1 and 2. But sometimes students want to get an early start on the project. And you can really, as soon as you pick a supervisor and pick a project and have applied for it and are chosen, then you can really start working on it right away if you want. And importantly, at the end of the year, you will then write a thesis on this original research project that you've performed, and then have that as an output. So not only do you get your degree in the end, but during that year, you're taught really important skills that are useful both in academia and beyond academia. And then you have an output in the form of a thesis that in some cases supervisors and students even go on to publish. So they'll take that thesis, if it's particularly good, they'll sort of continue work on it a bit, and then submit it to an academic journal to be published. So finally, the community itself, obviously, we're interested in research, we're interested in teaching. That's why we do the jobs that we do. But also, we've got a community here that involves research and then social aspects. So one of the big things is every week we have a seminar series called the Speech Science Forum, SSF. This takes place on Thursdays, so we just had one yesterday, where we have somebody either from within academia or sometimes within industry give a talk on either something they've been working on or some sort of concept. Sometimes we even have panels of people who all work on the same thing but from different perspectives come and give sort of a panel discussion on what their experiences are. We usually have every year a panel like this about academics who have since gone into industry, and they talk about their experiences working in a different domain and working for a big company. It's also a time to interact with not only the speaker, but then also other students and staff members. And we always have some drinks and nibbles afterwards that sort of helps make things a little bit easier for discussion. And generally, I think we're a pretty fun group to hang out with. Sometimes we go to the pub after the talks. Joseph and I did this yesterday. Stuart came along with his, actually, he was wearing this exact same outfit with this little black hat, came along to the pub afterwards. Okay, so that's sort of in a nutshell, a summary of the program and the department. I know that Rebecca had sent out earlier before this information about this session that we're having, and then also asked if you had any questions. So I've sort of taken these questions and curated them in a way where we're going to sort of talk about these questions that are meeting the same sort of theme or about the same sort of idea and kind of go through those together. And then at the end, we'll have time for any additional questions that might have come to mind in the meantime, or even while I've been giving this, this presentation. So first of all, can I select other routes courses? Are there any elective courses across these different routes? Hopefully by now that I've given a summary of what the degree program structure is like, you know the answer to that is yes. So that's, again, ideally, that's what you would hopefully get out of this is sort of, if there's a route you're interested in, then already think about, okay, which ones would I choose for my optional modules? But then maybe there was one or two from another route that you might be interested in. Again, you've got up to 3 elective modules that you can choose that don't have to be part of your specialization. Does the route of development and of language and speech need Python skill or R? Really interesting question. So Python and R, we've got courses in the technology of language and speech program. Again, if you're on the development of language and speech program, but one of those modules seems interesting to you, you can take those as part of your elective list. Also, R in particular, not just a programming language, but more importantly, it's what the language that most academics use for doing statistical treatment of data. The introductory stats module doesn't necessarily introduce R. They use what's called Jamovi, which is a sort of a simpler graphical user interface for doing stats. But you can use that opportunity to sort of learn how to translate some of the things that you're doing in Jamovi to R. If you're taking more advanced stats modules, you would learn R as part of that. So in short, it's not necessary for the development of language and speech route, but if you're interested in learning these skills, then we have those opportunities available for you. Which areas of linguistic research are UCL looking to enter into or continue within the next 10 years? Are there future developments related to the field? Also, super interesting questions here. We can't predict the future, obviously, but what I can tell you is that the most recent module that we, or not module, most recent route that we have introduced to the program is this technology of language and speech route. This is something that I worked on putting together, thought this is really good for us to have on the program. And so we spent a couple of years really working hard to sort of introduce that and curate it in a way that's useful for students. What I can say is that since that route has been introduced, it has already become one of, if not our most popular route as far as number of students who apply to it, and then also the number of students who end up coming to do their studies as part of that route. So I say that this is definitely an area that we will continue. There is desire for it, there's need for it, it's something that students are really wanting to get skills in that area. During our research projects, we may need to find participants who fulfill specific criteria. Would it be possible for us to get support from our department, perhaps by facilitating connections with various organizations or schools on behalf of the students? Absolutely. So there's obviously a limit to the kind of support that we can give, especially you mentioned schools here. That's something that usually takes a bit of time and planning to be able to get into a school and get around children. However, you might be able to work with a supervisor as part of your research that already has those links and already has a way to be able to access schools. Or if it's something else that just getting certain types of data or getting in touch with organizations, this is part of what the supervisor does for you. So they sort of guide you in the research, can make recommendations and whatnot, but they can also help you use their network to be able to do these sort of things that you might be interested in doing. How will the modules be taught, online or in person? How much of the content will be delivered in BSL and how much in English? Obviously, very two different questions, but both related to what is the actual teaching like. First one, very thankfully, we're not doing online teaching anymore since COVID. That was sort of a nightmare that we had to put up with for a couple of years. Our modules are in person now. There may be an odd week or two where a particular module lead needs to go to a conference or be out of the country or whatever. And for that week, in an ad hoc way, they might have a recorded lecture that they put online. But generally, the modules are all taught face-to-face in person. Now, this question here about how much will be delivered in British Sign Language and how much in English, this is obviously a question that's in particular, that's important for the Sign Language and Deaf Studies route. If you take a module by a professor named Kate Rowley, her first language is BSL, so she teaches her content in BSL. Some of the other specialists on that route, I know that they teach both in BSL and English. They go back and forth. But we also have, as part of our services at UCL, BSL interpreters if needed. So for example, we have a student this year who has a BSL interpreter come during courses that are taught in English to be able to provide that sort of in-person translation. Are bursaries available? Is there potential for scholarships for the course? This is something we're currently looking into, but yes, we are planning to do this. If I can work it out with finances, that will be okay. Our plan is to have two different bursaries, one for international students and one for domestic students. Because the international fees are higher than the domestic or home fees, the bursary for domestic students, we're planning that to be £2,000 and for home students to be £1,000. It's a bit tricky with finances because we can only be approved for the expenditure for next year based off of our cost for this year. So things are still in the midst of being calculated before we can get confirmation. But that is our plan, is to have bursaries for both home students and, well, for a home student that is chosen and a international student that is chosen. What are most graduates doing? How is this master's program, how does it compare with Oxbridge from an employability perspective? So I think the best way to sort of answer this question is to sort of look at what, from past students, what they are doing currently. So these are some results from an alumni survey that Rebecca recently sent out. So these are very recent graduates. And just in answer to the question, what are you doing now? What's your life like after finishing the MSc Language Sciences program? We have a software engineer, someone who stayed at UCL, do a PhD in the Department of Clinical Education and Health Psychology. Not listed here, we also have a student who stayed on to do a PhD within SHAPS, and then a student who was from a closely related master's program who has also stayed on to do a PhD within SHAPS, student who Joseph and I are currently supervising. Someone who isn't necessarily doing a PhD, but is a research assistant, so they stayed within research. Another PhD student, again, they liked UCL and PAL so much, they stayed and are doing a PhD in the Department of Language Cognition. A research specialist in the US, University of Pennsylvania, in neurosurgery. An editorial assistant for a nonprofit publisher. So something that isn't necessarily research, but it's definitely language related, right? Someone who's working in university, studying language disorders and developing clinical language assessment tools. Another PhD student at University of Reading in neuroscience, and a research assistant at a university at NYU Abu Dhabi. So you can see there's a bit of a range here. A lot of people who have liked the master's so much that they wanted to stay on within academia. That's what Joseph and I did. We got our masters and then wanted to stay on and got PhDs, and here we are. But then also people who they didn't continue on with additional study, but have stayed within the university atmosphere doing research. And then people who are not in academia, who are doing software engineering or editorial work. So there's a bit of a range here. Now, these last two questions, again, they don't seem totally related, but I'm going to relate them by answering them in the same way. Can I submit applications for two different tracks or two different routes under language science? And is there a minimum number of credits in a language-related area, such as linguistic speech science, English language psychology, cognitive science, or cognate discipline? So that's in quotes because it comes from our website. So how much of that is required for undergraduate degree that is multidisciplinary? The way that these relate to each other is that the personal statement that you write comes in very, very important here. So for example, yes, you can apply for as many routes as you want. However, I will tell you that if your personal statement doesn't have a clear motivation for both of those routes, it's probably not going to be a very strong application. What I mean by that is that we don't want to see sort of a blanket sort of form personal statement that could really apply for anything. We want to know, do you understand what this route is, and is this really a good fit for you? That sort of thing comes out in motivation that's present in your personal statement. So although you can submit applications for as many routes as you want, for a given route, we really want to know, well, one, does this person have a background that will help us sort of be reasonably sure that they'll be successful in that route, but also do they truly want to be in this route? Are they motivated to be in this route? So we want to see that for each route that you apply for. And then this also relates to the question of, is there a minimum number of credits for one of these areas? There's not a minimum number of credits. However, if you're worried that you don't have much background in one of these areas, you can use the personal statement to sort of explain that. So you can say, well, I really don't have this background, or I've taken these courses and they're somewhat related, but then you can sort of argue for your motivation despite that. Obviously, it's helpful for us to look at a transcript and see, yes, they've taken a lot of course in this area, but again, if you don't have that sort of background, this is where the personal statement does come into play and is quite important. Okay, so that's all I have for the presentation and for the questions that were previously sent to Rebecca. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my share here. And then we'll open it up to you. If you have any additional questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put a question in the chat. Or maybe the presentation was so incredibly clear, all questions have been answered, there's nothing left.
Chris, you've had one question come through on the Q&A section asking if the degree certificate, if it just says language sciences or if it says the route on it.
It has the specialization as well. So it'll say MSc Language Sciences. I don't remember the exact wording. I think it is specialization. Do you remember the exact wording it has, Rebecca?
I can't remember, but I can find out and
Okay.
provide that information, because over the years the description has changed.
Yeah.
So it used to be specialization with, and now it's language sciences with the route. So yeah, we'll have
Okay.
to double check. But yeah, I think it is on there.
Yeah. Yeah. In some way, whatever the wording is currently, it has the name of the degree and then also the route that you've taken that degree through.
We can also provide, because sometimes certificates aren't available at the point where you want to like apply for a job or an internship or something. So we can provide documents from the department stating what program you were on,
Yeah.
what your confirmed results are, or you know, what we expect to happen before the exam board.
Yeah, cool. There's a question then here. Well, actually, a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and look up something really quick. UCL module catalog. So, question here: can you please recommend some books that students can choose to read to prepare for the courses in neuroscience of language and speech? I'll do you one better. I will say, go ahead and follow this link here to the module catalog. And then if you go on our homepage for the department, or not for the department, for the program, which again, I'll go ahead and put here in the chat if you don't have it ready available. So that second link then takes you to the program. If you then click on, in this case, for example, well, first of all, there's a nice new video that we've recently put out. So that's if you want to watch that video on that homepage. But then also, so the question here is specifically neuroscience of language and speech. So then if you click on neuroscience of language and speech, you'll see the optional, well, you see the compulsory modules, you'll see the optional modules listed as well. So if you click on those, or if you put in the module code into that first link that I said, the module catalog, it'll take you to a description of the module. And importantly, it'll give you the name of the staff member who teaches that module. And what I would recommend is contacting that staff member for that particular module specifically. So there are, general readings that we may or may not be able to give you. This isn't really my area, so I'd have to ask some people. But if you really want the best readings to help you prepare, is email those people who are the specialists on teaching that route. Is there any option to complete the MSc part-time over a longer period? Very good question, and I totally forgot to put that into the slides. Yes, so I mentioned that the MSc Language Sciences program is a one-year degree program. So that is the sort of the route that, or the way that most people, most students that come in take that is the one-year program. We also have two different options. There is part-time, which is 2 years. There's a bit of a requirement here where some of the compulsory modules, so for example, the topics and methods in language sciences, and then the statistics module, we require you to take those two in the first year, and then the research project, we require you to take that in the second year. So otherwise, you can then sort of spread the other modules you have for the optional modules and the elective modules over the 2 years as you want. That's the only requirement that we have. There is no additional fee to do this, so the fee is split down the middle in and paid into year 1 and year 2, so it's not any more expensive to take it as a 2-year than it is a 1-year. It just takes that extra year of doing it. And there's also an option that's called flexible or modular, sometimes like modular flexible with a hyphen. Anyway, either of those words, that is, you have up to 5 years. You don't have to take the full 5 years. You can take any way that you can within the 5 years, but that route gives you up to 5 years to complete all the requirements for the degree. Question, I'm interested in pursuing research in phonetics and speech science, particularly speech acoustics, sociophonetics, experimental phonetics, and articulography. But I also have an interest in computational linguistics and the use of software and working with speech data. That sounds very familiar. That's everything you said is kind of what I do. Would you recommend technology of language and speech or principles of language and speech? That's interesting. I think either of those routes would be good for you. Given what you've said here in the order that you've put them, seems the primary interest is in acoustics and sociophonetics and experimental phonetics. That being the case, I would probably recommend the principles of language and speech route, and then take some of these more computational courses as part of your electives. However, if you want to have technology of language and speech as your focus and you want that listed on your transcript, then you could always do it the other way around. Take it as technology of language and speech, and then take things like my intro to speech sciences or Bronwyn's sociolinguistics module as part of your elective courses. I'm interested in a career in software engineering, but integrating ML, machine learning, and natural language processing, i.e. an emphasis on making real-life applications. Does the technology pathway include these kinds of practical applications, or is it more theory and research-based? How do graduates' careers reflect this? Really good question. The taught content is more theory and research-based. So you're learning about the concepts that you would then apply to your research project. So you can sort of think of it that way, as terms 1 and 2. It is a taught degree program, so that's where you're getting the teaching about those concepts. However, if you then want to have some sort of actual application that you then have as an output as part of your research, then you can do that. And what I would recommend then is searching for those particular supervisors who would then provide that sort of teaching. One comes to mind is someone named Peter Howell. He's not actually in the PALS division, but he has done a lot of work in supervising our students, and he's involved with what's called the BIX initiative, BIX, which is a way of sort of linking UCL students to industry projects. So that's something that you can do as part of your research project as well. From the Q&A section, are there opportunities to study a lot of different languages at UCL, or do we mostly study English and other European languages? So the only opportunity for a non-English language study within our program specifically would be BSL, would be British Sign Language. If you're looking in particular to study different languages, and if that's your interest, I would probably recommend not the language sciences degree, but perhaps, for example, MA Linguistics. So the MA Linguistics program at UCL is also excellent, but that's more focusing on, I think, where this sort of question is coming from. Is there already a timetable for the full-time program? Are the lectures every day? Rebecca, can people who are not UCL students, can they access timetables?
Yes, so we've got the UCL timetable is online. I'll put the link in the chat. It's called the Common Timetable, and if you go into there, there's a tab which is called custom, and you can type in the module that you're interested in, and it will bring up the timetable for this year. Most of our timetabling, we try to recreate year on year. There's sometimes some modules that may need to change time or day, but we try to keep it as similar as possible to the previous year. So it'll give you a rough idea of when they're planned now. The actual timetable for next year won't be ready until the summer, as it takes quite a while to sort it out. But we can give you information. I understand that some of you may need to juggle work or caring responsibility. So if over the course of the summer you really need to know when something is likely to be, you can by all means email us and we can let you know when we have requested the slot for it. I'll pop the link to the timetable in the chat for you.
Cool, thanks, Rebecca. And then the question about the second part of that question, then our lectures every day. That really, I mean, that's how you set up your timetable. So for a given module, usually there are, I mean, there's some differences between modules, but typically there'll be 2 different sessions. There'll be 1 lecture session sometime in the week, and then there will be usually some sort of practical session. So either a tutorial or a laboratory session or something that's where you sort of apply the learning that you got during the lecture session to some sort of practical application. So again, some modules don't run that way. They just have 1 long session where the sort of everything's put together. Some might have potentially more than 2. So some modules might have a tutorial and then also a laboratory session. So it really depends on what modules you're taking and how you set up your personal timetable. Regarding the English language requirement, graduate in fall 2023. Graduated in fall 2023 from university in the UK. The website mentions that graduates from the past 2 years from an English-speaking country are exempt from the IE or IELTS. Does this policy apply to all courses? I would say that this is probably a question for central UCL admissions, at least, or unless, Rebecca, you happen to know off the top of your head.
So generally, most courses at UCL have the English language requirement. It can be set at different levels, but if you have been taught in English for your most recent degree, they normally accept that, but there is a list of institutions that meet the requirements. So the best thing to do is to contact admissions directly and ask them if you meet the requirements, if you believe that your course has been taught in English. Aside from that, there isn't much that we can do to waiver the English language requirement. But the best thing, if you're unsure, is to check with the admissions office. You should be able to find their contact details on the bottom of any correspondence that they've had with you.
Right, so then, I'm wondering if you can give a little more detail on how much of the core optional elective modules include seminar work. I've seen some modules referencing backup sessions and information sheets in addition to the lectures, so just hoping for some clarification. Stephanie, I think I might ask you to potentially clarify a bit more what you mean. I'm not sure quite what you mean by that. So I'll go on to some of the other questions. If you can maybe pop in the chat some clarification there, and we'll come back to it. Are there courses about the cognition of bilingualism or multilingualism? Really interested in these topics and hoping to research this. Really good question. I would say, so I'm going to put in from the UCL module catalog a link to a module called Bilingualism and Second Language Acquisition. Now, we do see some bit of language surrounding cognition in there. And this is a really good example if you follow this page. So I mentioned earlier, so if you put a module code in, you'll get this description. Then if you scroll down to where it says module deliveries, you'll see who the module leader is. So this module is taught by Dr. Wing Yin Chow, And if you look her up on UCL and you can get her email address, then you can contact her directly. So again, so it's sort of like, what reading should I do? It's best to contact the module leader in particular to ask about that particular module. Same thing here. You might want to ask or read the description, and if you're still sort of unclear if this sort of meets what you want, then contact her, and then you can get some more information. Also potentially consider her as a research supervisor for a project where you can work on this particular question.
Chris, I think that one isn't offered to postgraduates. That's something that you need to check when you look on the module catalogue down the bottom.
Yeah.
It says an undergraduate delivery and a postgraduate delivery, and that one I don't think does postgraduate deliveries.
Oh no. Okay, so
There
same
may be
thing.
some others that do.
Yeah, so same thing. Contact contact Wing Yin, because she'll be the one to really know. Either there might be something else that she offers, and if not, she'll be the one to know whether there is something that would apply. If I apply for a full-time program, can I switch to part-time? I think maybe, Rebecca?
You can. So if you start the program and you think, actually this is a bit too much for me to juggle at the moment, and you want to switch to part-time, you can put in a request to switch to part-time, but it must be done within the teaching terms. So you can't leave it to the end of term 2 and then switch to part-time. It would need to be done in term 1, or ideally at the very beginning of term 2 if it's any later, and then they can switch your mode, and that's when you could take out some modules to add to next year. Also with the part-time and the modular flexible, it is normally only available to home students because of visa restrictions, but it does depend what visa you're on. But yeah, it's mainly home fee-paying students that are eligible for it.
I was looking at the semantic pragmatic development course info. They mention a 1-hour backup for MA students after the lectures. I don't know. So this is a question that I've not seen this term before. It's not a term I use for my modules. I would contact that particular module lead to understand what that's about. My hunch is that's a sort of tutorial session, but you'll need to email that particular module lead to find out specifics about that module. Other questions? Right. Well, hopefully, oh, sorry. When do applicants typically receive a response? Is there a specific acceptance rate for international students? I'll answer the second one first. No. It really varies year on year. We don't shoot for a percentage acceptance rate. We really do look on an individual basis, applicant by applicant, whether this is a good match. Now, for the first question, part of this depends on Central UCL and part of it depends on us. So usually how this works is that as you apply, then it goes through first Central UCL or admissions. They do all of their checks and everything, and then it's sent to us locally. Typically, we try to then process our applications locally within about 2 weeks. Then it goes back to Central UCL admissions before you then receive a response. Typically, it depends on the time of year and how many applications are coming through. Typically, that entire process, I'd say maybe about 4 weeks. Is that about right, Rebecca?
Yeah, generally about 4 weeks. It can depend on how long it takes your referee to respond to the request. And also just to let you know, there's been a change in the requirement for the referees as well. So it used to be 2 referees, now it's only 1. So that does speed up the process a lot more. So yeah, we aim to hopefully get a decision out to you within 4 weeks.
Cool. Right. Well, that takes us nearly then to the top of the hour, and it seems like questions have sort of petered out. So we'll go ahead and end our session. But again, we have the recording if you want to come back and watch this. But if you have any questions at all, just feel free to email any of the three of us. So email Rebecca for questions that are related more to the actual the pragmatics of the program, the structure, and anything, any sort of questions about that. If you have questions that's more related to potentially the content, then me or Joseph. And yeah, thanks again, everyone, for coming, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.